This is Miss Hennessy here from the Guidance Department. Today I'm lucky enough to be joined with Mr. Michael James from Quinnipiac University. Hi, Michael. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us. So we could start the interview off by, just asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, the school you represent, Quinnipiac. What's your favorite aspect of the campus and school culture?
Sure. My name is Michael James. This is my 7th year working in college admissions. I've been lucky enough to be at Quinnipiac for the last year and a half or so. After working at 2 previous institutions down south, I wanted to make the move back up to the Northeast. And I'm really fortunate to be working at Quinnipiac. There's so many exciting things happening at the university right now. I think sort of from a more national standpoint, winning the national championship in hockey this spring has really been helpful for us in sort of expanding our horizons. But when we have students from, my recruitment territory in New Jersey and want them to come up to campus, we love to show off the fact that we're building a new business school, a new residence hall will be open next year, a new general academic building. Like there's a lot of sort of capital infrastructure projects that have just been completed, like our new Rec and Wellness Center that just opened or are going to be completed within the next year. So for juniors and seniors who are in high school now coming into Quinnipiac in the next few years with everything new on campus is still great. We're really proud of the community that we have at Quinnipiac. We have 6,000 undergraduate students. You can walk from one end of campus to the other in 10 minutes. So it's big enough that doesn't feel like high school all over again, but small enough that the parts that you do enjoy about high school, seeing familiar faces, getting to really build those tight-knit relationships with your friends, like that's still possible with us as well. And that is, I think, my favorite aspect about the institution is just how inclusive, how welcoming. I'm not a Quinnipiac alum, in full transparency. I don't have family who went to Quinnipiac. So for me, coming from the outside in, the support that I've received, like being on campus every day and just seeing how wonderful our students are, our faculty and staff, like that's something that I really try and communicate with prospective students that hopefully would want to be part of an atmosphere like that.
Excellent. Thank you. I know you mentioned the championship hockey win, which is awesome. Congratulations. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sports and clubs and activities, Greek life at Quinnipiac University?
Yep. So we have around 140 clubs and organizations on campus. So those don't include the D1 sports. We have 21 Division I sports. Men's and women's hockey tend to be our biggest in terms of competing at the national level. The men did just win the national championship, like I said, and the women this year were in the last 16 of the NCAA tournament. Both men's and women's soccer made the NCAA tournament last year as well. Our acrobatics and tumbling team has competed for national championships in the past. But other than that, softball, baseball, field hockey, lacrosse, track and cross country, like there are a bunch of different options for students. The one that I get asked about that we don't have is football, unfortunately, but everything else, that you can think of on campus, we do have it. Outside of the Division I sports, so many opportunities for students to get involved, whether that's with political organizations on campus, religious organizations, service organizations. About 70% of our students do some sort of service project during their time at Quinnipiac. Greek life as well. It's not a huge part of the institution. It's around 20% of our students are in a fraternity or a sorority, but we do have those opportunities for students as well. Arts groups, spirit, entertainment, multimedia. We have a very active School of Communication. So if you want to work for the student newspaper, you want to work for our student-run advertising agency across campus, like there's a lot of different ways for students to get involved, and they have a lot of control. Student-run EMT organization as well. So we do put a lot of that responsibility, give opportunities to students rather than them sort of being told what to do. I think is a really great way for students to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about the fun traditions that you have at your school?
There are a few. I mean, starting with sports, I guess, because we had just talked about hockey, the Battle of Whitney Avenue every spring. Our sort of big rival in hockey is Yale. So Yale is 20 minutes away in New Haven, Connecticut. The same road, Whitney Avenue, you can actually take from Yale's campus all the way up to Quinnipiac. So that's a really big deal. We play them once at Yale, and then they come to Quinnipiac as well during the season. And that's a game where students are lining up, for tickets hours before the game starts to make sure that they can be part of the student section for that. So yeah, Battle of Whitney Ave is a big one. We have an annual day of service. I mentioned, how important that is to the university as well. There's an annual day of service called the Big Event, where we have students getting involved in Hamden, the town that we're located in, New Haven, North Haven, Wallingford, kind of towns, all across the area, giving back to the communities there. We have our engagement fair. So all those clubs and organizations that I mentioned, the first Wednesday after students move in, our quad is completely taken over by those organizations, and students get on mailing lists and start talking to other folks and figure out, what they might want to join. And that's a really fun way, I think, for students to start building their networks and taking advantage of what universities have, which, tend to be a little bit more than what high schools are able to offer. So that's another big one for students as well. And then we also have a number of students who, it's not a tradition as such, but I guess kind of a rite of passage, where they hike Sleeping Giant. So Sleeping Giant State Park is literally right across the street from campus. There's a number of trails that will take you right to the top. Some of them are easier and more gradual. Some of them are, you're like actually scaling rocks to get to the top. That's another one as well. And I think before, students graduate, that's something that a lot of them take part in as well.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. What are some top majors at your school?
We have 60 something majors. I mean, if I were to showcase a few, I'd start, I think, with our School of Health Sciences and our School of Nursing. So nursing, our physical therapy, occupational therapy, physician assistant program. Those are all direct entry programs where if you get in, you're going to sort of move forward along the way there. Nursing leads to a bachelor's degree, whereas PT and OT can both lead to doctorates. The physician assistant program leads to a master's. But the nice part about those being direct entry, you don't have to apply to grad school. You're already set. The physician assistant program is in the top 15 in the country. The PT and OT program are both in the top 20 in the country. Nursing is huge for us. We bring in almost 200 nurses every year, and they get guaranteed clinical hours with a partnership that we have with Hartford Healthcare here in Connecticut. So I'd really say health sciences is a big one for us. I want to make sure I shout out the School of Communications as well. They have some fun programs, including their film, TV, and media arts major, which really encourages students to take advantage of QU in LA, where you're guaranteed an internship in Los Angeles, either for a semester or for a year. Business is big for us too, with our location right in between New York City and Boston. The fact that we're building a new School of Business now that'll open in fall 2025. The fact that you can get an MBA in 4 years at Quinnipiac, that's big for us as well. And then our largest sort of college on campus, the College of Arts and Sciences, in terms of number of students enrolled, that's, as general as it's going to get, from political science to chemistry to environmental studies. It sort of runs the humanities spectrum, and that's, a large one for us as well. So those are the ones that I'd highlight. But again, we have 60 different programs, and there are lots of different ways that students can pursue an education at Quinnipiac.
An MBA in 4 years, that's huge.
That's a big one. Yeah. And you keep your undergraduate scholarship during the 4th year of your graduate education. You don't have to apply to the MBA program, like you're in it from day one. We really maximize or are trying to maximize that return on investment. We understand, as a private institution, what you see as a sticker price is expensive, and we can talk about ways to, actually make it more affordable than what it appears at first glance, but still wanting to make sure that if you're coming to Quinnipiac, we're going to get you out the door, not just with an undergraduate degree, but hopefully with a graduate degree as well, and often on an accelerated time frame.
Awesome. Thank you. So I was actually going to ask you about financial aid packages next. Can you talk about what the typical financial aid packages look like at Quinnipiac?
Yep. So the sticker price that students will see on our website for tuition and room and board is just over $69,000. It's, I think, $69,360. But I can tell you, that's not what students are paying, in sort of full transparency, as the cliche goes. Students are automatically considered for merit scholarships just based on their application to Quinnipiac. So what we'll do is look at your GPA from West Morris Central. We'll recalculate it to put it on a 4.0 scale to sort of standardize it across the country. And then depending on where your GPA falls, that's the scholarship that you're going to receive. So we have scholarships that start at $18,000 and they go all the way up to $32,000. There's 5 different brackets essentially, like different ranges that your GPA would fall into. And so, for us, the average scholarship was just over $25,000 last year. That would take your cost of attendance down to $44,000, and that's not even counting any additional financial aid, whether that's loans or grants or external scholarships. And so what we try and say is that, let's say you're going to pay $44,000, you got the average merit scholarship. That becomes fairly comparable to what an out-of-state public school might cost. So we're trying to at least, be competitive with those. And we also allow students to appeal their scholarship package. So in the spring, you'll get your merit scholarship offer at the same time as your admissions decision. And then in the spring, you can come back to us and say, hey, I'm also considering X, Y, and Z school, or my family member lost a job. We actually don't have as much, income as it may have appeared. So I'd like to request an appeal. You fill out a form, and we've, increased scholarship offers through appeals as well. And that's something that I always encourage students to do. The worst we can say is no. If we say no, it's not like we rescind your offer of admission. We just can't go any higher, but you do at least have a chance through that appeal to get a little bit more.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. What's the type of student you typically accept based on test scores, GPA, class rank, those kind of factors?
I think so. We have some programs. I mentioned a few of them before, the physician assistant program in particular, but physical therapy, OT, nursing as well. Our 3+3 law program is another one of these. We have some programs that are, I would say more competitive than others. So I can give you kind of averages at Quinnipiac. The average admitted student last year had a 3.6 GPA on a 4.0 scale. If they did submit a test score, it was a 1200 SAT, which I think it's around a 25 ACT. We are test optional for the majority of programs, but our physician assistant program, you do have to submit a test score. 3+3 law, you do have to submit a test score. Nursing and PT is technically test optional, but I would really say it's test recommended for those programs. But again, some programs, you can be a little bit short of that academically and still potentially be offered admission. There are some programs where you're going to need far more than that 3.6, 1200 to be offered admission, but that's sort of averaging it out across the university.
Got it. Thanks. For the programs that are test optional, if they do not send their test scores, does that affect scholarship consideration?
No. So yeah, our scholarships are just GPA based. So we don't look at test scores at all when looking at offering merit money.
That's great. So we are an IB World School. We have both the IB Diploma Program and the IB Career Program here at Central. How does IB affect a student's admissions candidacy? And do IB students have an advantage over our non-IB students?
I would say in terms of, yes, I would say IB students who are on that track are going to have an advantage over students who are not, right? Because some have an opportunity to take it, they're pursuing that, and others didn't. I wouldn't say that students who are on the IB track have an advantage over students at other schools who are on an AP track. I think that is pretty even in terms of how we review students who sort of pursue both options. But I would say if you are at Central and you're an IB student and you're at Central and you're not, the IB student is going to look stronger to us. From an admissions perspective, it's helpful, right? Because we want to see, same with AP schools, that students are challenging themselves in higher level classes, whether they are the SL or HL level courses. We want to make sure that, hopefully they're taking the exams, because the IB exams, depending on your score, you can get college credits knocked out before you even get to Quinnipiac. And from a cost of attendance standpoint, potentially graduating a little bit earlier, that's also, helpful as well. So yeah, there are some advantages, I think, to doing it, but I also would preface that and say that if you're not an IB student, that doesn't mean you have no chance of getting in, right? Like we'll still review students from their high school. We look at them in the context of their high school. We know who is applying as a whole from West Morris Central, and then can evaluate candidates, that way.
How important is the essay in the admissions process at Quinnipiac?
So I would say some of our program, again, 3+3 law, PA, nursing, PT, OT, they have supplemental essays that are on top of the Common App essay. So for those programs in particular, the supplemental essay definitely is a factor, right? We're asking you to kind of go above and beyond because those programs are a little bit more selective, and that is really where you can put your best foot forward. So for those in particular, I would say very important. The standard Common App essay, I read them all. I don't necessarily think that they are make or break. I'm not proofreading them for grammar. Yes, I would ask you to have them proofread, right? Like, don't just submit it. Don't read them or don't write them like you're just texting your buddy. Like, you should do your best to make them like a formal essay.
Right.
But unless I see something super concerning, like that is a red flag, or unless I read just it's one of the best essays I've ever read, we get so many of them that I can't sit here and say that an essay is gonna have a huge impact on the vast majority of students. I do think it can impact students who academically are on the borderline. So if you are on the fence from a grades standpoint, but you have a great essay, I think that can push you over the top. I think if your essay is weak and you are sort of an average student, that could potentially impact or hinder your chances of being admitted. I think for the majority of students whose grades they're strong, their activities are strong, the essay probably isn't quite as important. But I do still think you should put your best foot forward. And the perk of being on Common App is you're not having to write 15 different essays. Like, you're writing one essay in theory to send to a bunch of schools. So you really should do the best you can in coming up with an essay that, exemplifies who you are. Like, colleges really want to build a community of responsible individuals who want to make a difference, all those things. And the essay is a really good way to showcase what you'd bring to a school.
Right. I was actually going to ask about the activity section on the Common App next. How important is that section in the admissions process? Are you looking for students who have a lot of leadership roles within the activities they're involved with, or they started doing activities as early as their freshman year? What makes a student stand out in that way?
Yeah. So on the flip side, I actually do think the activity section is more important, generally speaking. I do. And this is me personally. Like, I don't want to speak for college reps all across the board. I would say for me, as I'm reviewing your application, activities are really, really important. And what I mean by that, I always throw this distinction out there. Like, Common App lets you list up to 10 different activities, I think, and you can put how many weeks a year you're doing these things. You can put how many hours a week. You can write little descriptions of what you're doing. I don't need you to put 10 different things and maybe you're only doing them 1 week a year for 2 hours a week, whatever. Like, if I don't necessarily reward the student who does a little bit of 10 different things, or penalize the student. And I use swimming as an example because I feel like this happens all the time with swimmers. If you're a competitive swimmer, that's your whole life. Like, you're practicing before school, you're practicing after school. You simply don't have the time to really get involved in 8 or 9 different extracurricular activities. For me, I don't worry about the number of activities as much as I do your time commitment to them, like trying to show as much mastery, like as much interest as possible in whatever it is you're doing. So if that's 10 things, great. If that's only one thing because that's all you have time for, that's fine as well. So I don't just count them. I'm looking really at the sort of quality and the time you're invested in whatever it is you're doing outside of school. But yeah, that does really matter. Leadership activities. So from a sports perspective, that's being a team captain. That's getting involved in student government. That's sort of holding a position on an executive board or within National Honor Society or whatever it is. Like, leadership, I think, can make a difference. Leadership can also be something like having a part-time job and opening and closing the coffee shop. That can be babysitting because you literally are responsible for a human life, right? Like, leadership doesn't need to be, I'm the president of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it can mean that, but it also has a number of different sort of connotations as well. And those things are important. They're reflective of students who do want to excel. And every college and university is going to want that person on their campus.
Absolutely. How can a student make themselves stand out in the admissions process at your school?
I think so. Again, maximizing that activity section is really important. Quinnipiac is an institution that encourages students to do interviews. So I actually just yesterday opened up for 5 interview slots in Morristown. They're now already filled, but like, I do come to Morris County and want to make myself available to students to sit down with me for half an hour, and I ask them some questions or they ask me questions. And An interview is a great way so that when I'm reviewing 1,500 applications this fall, I didn't interview 1,500 people, but if I interviewed you, I'm more likely to then remember you so that you're not just a name on an application. Like I have notes, I can remember your face, like that personalization piece. I think is really helpful. We do track demonstrated interest. So what I mean by that is the more you engage with us, whether that's at a college fair, whether that's you coming to campus for a tour, you come for open house, like the more connection you make with Quinnipiac, that's helpful as well from a review standpoint. So I'd encourage you to sort of touch as many sort of basis as you can throughout the admissions process. And that can even start, honestly, that can even start as early as junior year in terms of doing an interview or coming up to visit. You don't have yet, you're a senior, you should be doing those things. But you should, get started on that, even earlier in your high school career.
That's great advice about the interview component. And this is the last question here. If you could offer one piece of advice for a student, either just starting off the college research process, late sophomore, early junior year, or they're all the way at the end about to submit their applications on Common App, what's one piece of advice you would offer to them?
Yeah. So to me, you have to go visit campuses, right? And the reason I say that, there are literally thousands of campuses across the country, and a lot of them have phenomenal brand names, or a lot of them are in incredible cities. But you need to actually figure out what campus and what culture is best for you. Like if you're someone who wants to be in the heart of a big city, I will tell you now, you should not be coming to Quinnipiac. We don't have that. We have a beautiful campus. It's a traditional New England college campus. We can't really satisfy the urban piece for you because we're not in the heart of New York or Boston. Right. On the other hand, if you're someone who you want the smaller school field, you don't want to be at that 40, 50,000 huge state school, then Quinnipiac is a great fit for you. You're not going to really get a feel for what a school has to offer until you actually go visit it. Because again, you might want rural or urban, you might want small, medium, or large. You might want a campus that really cares about sports, or a campus that doesn't. You might want opportunities for internships, like whatever matters most to you. You have to sort of build your list that way first, and then go and figure out, like, whose students did I connect with? Like, did I like my tour guide? When I ate on campus, how was the dining hall? What did I think of the dorms? Like, those things you can do all the research externally, but until you see them, you're not really going to know. And I do think there's so much out there on the internet now. A lot of admissions offices have pretty robust Instagram or even TikTok content where you can search and do a lot of your research just from your phone whenever you want. But you do need to actually go physically see the schools as well. And we always encourage students to do that. We're really lucky in the Northeast to have a number of schools that are within 20 and 30 minutes. Like, there's really no excuse for not coming up to see your schools up here. I get it if you're wanting to think about Wyoming and it's far and it's rural, whatever, like you might only get to see one school, but for us, like you can see 4 and 5 schools within 2 days just because of how many there are up here. And that's really important, I think, to go do that sort of legwork actually on a campus.
Yeah, that's good advice. Thank you so much. This was an excellent interview. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to meet with us and, share more about Quinnipiac with the West Morris students. We really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Leah.
All right. Take care, Michael.
Thanks. You too.